So let's start with the display. We all know the standard fare iPhone display, especially with the iPhone Pro Max. Just like last year, it is a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR LTPO OLED display. Basically, it is a 120Hz display that can scale its refresh rate down to 1 Hz for the always on display. Just like last year. Another thing is also support for Dolby Vision HDR, just like the past few years. So a lot of that remains unchanged. They have, however, cut down on the bezels quite a lot. So we all know the state of iPhone bezels. They're really thick, right? This year, they've changed that. This year it is quite a bit thinner, not extremely noticeable, but it is a lot thinner than last year and 2 years ago. When it comes to the internals of the phone comes with the A17 Pro chip, which is a brand new chip released for the iPhone 15 Pro series. And you will realize that instead of calling it the A17 Bionic, like they normally would, they've called this one the A17 Pro. So that actually got me thinking during the event. Probably next year they will introduce a new A17 chip, but it's not the A17 Pro, it's probably just the A17 or A17 Bionic. And they'll just reserve this Pro name for the Pro phones, which kind of makes sense. Remember last year's A16 Bionic? Yeah, it's here now in the 15 and 15 Plus. And they've now increased the space between those two chips for the two different lineups. Now they're taking the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus as a sort of upper mid-range, reserving the 15 Pro Max as flagship. This time it is paired with 8 gigs of fast RAM, so you get more multitasking oh wait, yeah, it's an iPhone, it can't multitask. But 8 gigs of RAM, perfectly fine. It's 2 gigs more than last year, so I'll take that improvement happily. Who doesn't want more RAM? Alright, next thing, let's talk about the build of this phone. So, generally the design of iPhones hasn't changed in, well, since the iPhone 11 actually. If you realize, every single Pro series phone, the only change has been the size of the camera bump. And this year, they didn't even change that. Instead, they focus on the general shape of the phone. So this time, you have still flat sides, but it's slightly curved over the corners. I'd say about a 1mm radius for a curve around the edge of the phone so that it's less sharp. And you know, it actually helps the in the hand feel of the smartphone, because it doesn't feel very edge heavy and sharp. It actually feels comfortable now, especially on the Pro Max, which is bloody massive, right? And also, if you realize, this year Apple made a definitive focus on titanium being a major selling point of this iPhone 15 Pro lineup. And yes, Apple has put grade 5 titanium onto the side rails of this iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. And this grade 5 titanium is coated with a PVD coating. This allows them to put color onto the titanium, but do take note that if you're not getting the natural titanium color, I do suggest tossing it in a case, because this PVD coating is very, very fragile and easy to scratch off. Actually, this was tested quite a bit with Jerry Rig Everything's durability test, where he hit the phone with a blowtorch.
Is actually lighting some of the titanium dust on fire.
You will also realize that there are multiple different changes, including the silent switch, which is now an action button which you can map to do anything like turn on the torch, open the camera, run any shortcut you want, open accessibility shortcuts, all of that. It's pretty cool. And a long press of this button will allow you to perform shortcuts anytime you want. Of course, I have mapped this to open the camera, being the camera nerd that I am. So yeah, that's just me being me in a sense. There's also a new charging port, which is the one thing that I've waited for the longest time. A new port. It is USB Type C now because the European Union has forced them to switch. And the thing about this USB Type C, it gets a bit convoluted because on the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, it is a USB 2.0 port. So the speed is unchanged with Lightning. However, on the new Pro and Pro Max, it is USB 3.0 spec. That means it gets the fast speed, like the data transfer speeds are all top notch, really fast. Not Thunderbolt speeds yet, but 3.0. So it's about on par with everything else. Now, this has not changed the charging speed, which is still 25 watts, like last year's 14 Pro Max. So nothing much in the face of charging faster or not, none of that. But that means you can transfer files faster if you have a USB 3.0 cable. A lot of people have complained that Apple is not providing a USB 3.0 cable in the box, but why would they? No other company includes a USB 3.0 cable in the box because USB 3.0 is data transfer. The cable in the box is a USB 2.0 cable, which is on spec with every other smartphone manufacturer on the face of this planet, putting a USB 2.0 cable in the box. Just like the rest of the world. If you want a USB 3.0 cable, go buy a USB 3.0 cable. And speaking of cables, the cable that comes in a box is now a braided USB Type-C cable. So, good change. I like it, Apple. What this new USB-C port helps with though is reverse charging. So now instead of, having to take out a power bank and charge someone else's phone, in case you don't have a power bank, you can plug a cable into this iPhone 15 and you can plug it into your friend's phone and it will charge. You can plug it into AirPods, it will charge. And that's just 4.5 watts of reverse charging, but it's enough to keep a phone alive. In terms of the finish of the phone, you can get it in black titanium, white titanium, blue titanium, and natural titanium. As you can see, I've gone for the blue titanium option because it just looks really slick. Right, so now it's time to talk about my favorite part of this phone. The camera. Yes, the camera. The one thing that Apple is notorious for changing slightly and making the camera bump bigger for. No, actually this time they didn't. But they made some major changes inside the camera, which is pretty cool. So let's go from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. Now, action mode, relatively unchanged. It is still 2.8K, 30 frames per second. So it's all standard stuff. Action mode still looks very steady, just like before. When it comes to the ultra wide camera, it is still that same 12 megapixel ultra wide. So it's mostly unchanged. It still functions as a double macro camera, and the macro photos that come out of it are pretty clean. I kind of like it. Personally, it's, to be honest, kind of nice. But to be fair, it is still relatively low res. A major change would be the 12 megapixel 5x sensor. So now this is a new zoom lens for Apple because it is technically a periscope lens because it's bending light. But they've implemented the periscope lens in the most Apple way possible. Invent a solution. So what they've done is they've built a tetra prism, a mini tetra prism to sit inside the phone under the lens, and it kind of bends the light enough to get a 5x optical zoom. So this 5x camera is really good. So like for shots of far away things, you can get them in optical quality, 12 megapixels, and it looks really good. and this actually brings it up to the point where it has enough fidelity to shoot 25 times digital zoom and actually kick out a decently good result. And personally, I kind of have a mixed stance on this. A 5x camera, sure, it's good for like, long range portrait. However, I can see how this could be used for the wrong purposes. Like, say you're in a different building, you're zooming into, for example, someone changing in the window. Like Marques Brownlee said,
Super creeper mode.
yeah, if you're ethical with it, it's a perfectly good 5 times zoom camera. Right, so the new 48 megapixel sensor, yes, new 48 megapixel sensor is upgraded from last year's 14 Pro Max because it is a new sensor with new light gathering capabilities and a new element lens. So it should reduce lens flare quite a bit. And to be fair, it does reduce lens flare, but those with, let's say, a harsh lighting kind of thing. Like for example, if I point it at my external light over there, it will actually have lens flare, but in other cases it's not as apparent as previously. This new 48 megapixel sensor also allows the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max to shoot in 3 different focal lengths. So you get 24 millimeters, 28 millimeters, and 35 millimeters. This actually gives a lot of variety and change to the kind of shot you can get, especially when it comes to shot composition and other stuff like that. It's pretty cool, and it's not a bad camera. It's just that it seems a bit misleading that Apple is treating this like a full resolution shot when it really isn't. It's cropping in on a 48 megapixel sensor. Though, to be fair, it is still kicking out decently good quality photos. Another thing is this new 48 megapixel sensor allows a capture of 48 megapixel detail fused with the same full sensor size 12 megapixel shot for light and color and that kind of stuff. Like if the 48 megapixels is for detail, the 12 megapixel shot is for light. And these two are fused together, especially if some work with the photonic engine, which has been improved this time with the power of the A17 Pro, and you get a fused 24 megapixel output. So it's higher resolution and it's sharper if you zoom in. Pretty cool. With the new phones, you get new RAW modes. So basically, instead of just 12 megapixel RAW and 48 megapixel RAW, you get this new mode called 48 megapixel JPEG Max. So basically it's basically just the same thing. It's a full sensor shot, but instead of it just being a raw photo, it actually gives you the iPhone software processing. So it's still a 48 megapixel photo, but it has that iPhone processing over it. So you get the beautiful color of, a regular iPhone process shot. Now, on iPhone 15 Pro Max and iPhone 15 Pro actually, if you get any option that's above 128 gigs, you will get to shoot 4K ProRes log. So what log is basically the format that I'm shooting in right now actually on this 15 Pro Max. Log is basically a mode where it captures detail, but it flattens out all the colors and you get to play around with that color in editing softwares like DaVinci Resolve. And it's really cool, especially for a person like me who likes to tinker with my shot after I'm done. Like every single time I'm finished shooting a shot, I like to play around with the color. Perfect for me, because I get to tinker with the color after I'm done. And that is the one thing I love about the log mode. However, if you want to shoot 4K 60 frames per second log, you do have to get an external drive and shoot directly into that, because that is a hardware limitation. But right now you need a drive that is fast enough to support that kind of instant speed so that you can actually shoot 4K 60 frames per second into that external drive. That is a major issue that personally I've faced because I don't have a fast enough external drive. This has been my review of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.